This is a real 9-unit deal in Texas that was brought to me completely off market, and after running some of the numbers, this deal cash flows just over $4,400 every single month. So in this video, I'm gonna break down how this deal works, how I analyze deals, and how Section 8 is completely underrated. This property is located in Texas, and it's a 9-unit complex spread across 2 buildings. It was brought to me by wholesalers, so this is not going to be something you can find on Zillow or InvestorLift. This is a completely off-market property. These deals are more common than you think, especially after you've built rapport with agents, property managers, wholesalers, because after you've done that, you're going to get a lot of these deals coming your way without you even having to go out and search for them yourself. So for this one, I want to walk through this exact deal without hype, without theory. These are just going to be real numbers of what you can expect to see on a property like this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the specific market that I chose for this deal. Now, you won't always have your pick of the litter, but in most cases, you're going to get a lot of deals sent to you from different areas, different markets, and that can cause some analysis paralysis. So there's 2 simple things that I look for when I'm deciding if a property is in a good market or not. Number 1 is going to be Section 8 demand. The very first thing that I do is look at demand for that specific market and see how many Section 8 vouchers are active and what kind of wait lists they have for that specific area. This is going to tell me 2 things. Number 1, how much I'm going to be able to rent the property out for, and number 2, how quickly I'm going to be able to get a tenant into the property. And the second thing that I'm going to be looking at is the size of the market itself. Generally speaking, larger markets are almost always going to be acceptable for Section 8, and in a lot of cases, smaller markets get overlooked. Now, the key here is the market can be smaller, but it has to have enough demand to where you can get a tenant in the property within a few weeks. And this market's perfect because it blends those things together. You get stable rental demand while also seeing relatively low purchase prices relative to the rents in this market. So basically, I can buy a cheap home in this market and rent it out for a lot every single month. And this is key because it's not a flashy luxury market like Miami, Los Angeles, or New York. It's a working class rental market, and that's where cash flow lives for these Section 8 deals. So here's the actual property. It's a total of 9 units, 5 2-bed 1-bath units, and 4 1-bed 1-bath units. Each unit is roughly around 950 square feet, which is actually pretty large for this type of property. Now, this property does need around $80,000 in rehab, but that leads to a big value add opportunity here. Now, if you're a first-time investor, I would recommend staying away from these types of deals. They can be a little bit trickier to navigate, but if you already have a few Section 8 properties under your belt, these are the types of deals you want to start looking at. Now, let's look at some of the numbers because this is where deals are either made or completely broken. Now, starting off with the purchase price of this property, we're looking at a purchase price of $335,000, which is pretty low for what the seller is asking on this home. Now, they are willing to seller finance this deal for me, which means that I'm going to be able to put 8% down, which comes out to about $26,000 on this specific deal. Much lower than the traditional 20% you would see with the bank loan. And on top of that, closing costs are going to be much cheaper at the same time. If you were going with a bank loan on a property like this, closing costs are going to be a lot closer to 7 to 8% instead of the 2% we have underwritten here, which is already very conservative. Obviously, we already know that this is a value add, meaning that there's going to be an additional $80,000 in repairs needed for this home. And the seller already has bids on this, so we know that our total capital needed for this specific deal is about $113,000 to purchase this 9-unit. Interest rate for this seller finance deal, seller's asking for 8% interest amortized over 30 years, meaning that our monthly payment is going to come out to about $2,200 per month to the seller. Now, with the current rent on this property, this is not currently rented to Section 8 tenants. They're already netting $7,300 per month across the 9 units, which leads to a cash-on-cash return, which is already pretty high at 28%. Now, the key here and the problem that most investors make is they're underwriting these deals with traditional market rate rents, but what you really want to do is underwrite this as if it were a Section 8 deal. And in this case, that would come out to about $9,300 per month. So I'm going to go ahead and input that in here. That's going to change our cash-on-cash to skyrocket up to almost 50% cash on cash after just the first year alone. And keep in mind, this cash on cash is including the initial $80,000 we're putting into repairs, which is very huge here. Now let's talk about expenses because we do have to account for taxes, insurance, maintenance, management, as well as vacancy. Vacancy is going to be very low with Section 8 because there's such a high demand. In a lot of cases, they actually close off the waiting list because they have so many Section 8 applicants in these markets that they can't meet the demand, and there's not enough housing out there, so they end up closing off the wait list. So vacancy is something that you very rarely run into with these Section 8 deals. Now, for taxes and insurance, the seller gave me these numbers, so I just plugged them straight into my cash flow calculator. My rule of thumb with maintenance is 1% of the purchase price divided by 12. So in this case, we would take 1% of 335,000, divide that by 12, and then set that aside on a monthly basis. Standard full service management for one of these properties is 10%. Now you can actually negotiate this a little bit lower. A lot of property managers are willing to go down to 8%, but we want to underwrite this deal conservatively, so we're going to leave it at that 10%. So after all expenses and the mortgage, this property cash flows about $4,456 per month, or in other words, $53,000 per year. And the financing structure is ultimately what plays such a large part in why this deal cash flows so well and has such good returns. And it's one of the main reasons you need to be utilizing seller financing as opposed to 20% down payments. Because if you were putting 20% down on this property and increase your closing costs to about 7%, you would see that this property drops down to about a 33% cash on cash return, which is still relatively good. But obviously we want to optimize this and get this cash on cash as high as possible so you can get your money out as quickly as possible and invest it into the next deal. That's where scale comes from with these Section 8 deals. It's all about optimizing your cash on cash returns. Now there's a few things I also want to mention here as well. Number one is that in a lot of these apartment buildings, the meters tend to be connected, which means that as the landlord, you end up paying the utilities. Now on this specific deal, the meters are all separate, which means that I can have the tenants each pay their own utilities. It's not going to eat into my personal cash flow. And the second thing here is that this is a value add seller financing deal. So I'm going to be able to put a little bit of money down and I'm still going to be able to refinance out of this property in 6 to 12 months. And I'm very confident that I can get these rents up to $9,300 with Section 8 tenants. If not as high as $9,600, I'm going to keep it conservative at $9,300 though for the purposes of this example. I have a few things that are on my side right now because right now is a very good opportunity to purchase properties just like this. As of the time I'm making this video, interest rates are right around the high 6s. Currently Trump is in office right now and he's trying to get the interest rates lowered, which is most likely going to happen midway through this year, which means that in 6 to 12 months when I'm actually ready to refinance out of this property, I'm going to get a very good rate and I'm most likely going to be able to pull out most of, if not the entirety of my rehab capital back out of this deal. And one thing I want to recap is that if this is your very first deal or your second deal, you definitely want to stick to single family homes. You don't want to have to deal with connected meters. You don't want to deal with multiple tenants at a time, multiple paperworks with the housing authority. It's always better to get your feet wet with the process first, do it 1 or 2 times, and then you can start looking at deals like these. The real reason this deal works so well is because of seller financing. Because seller financing gives you time and allows you to put less of a down payment without over leveraging yourself. This is how deals like these go from average to exceptional. And one of the biggest things I see with most investors is that they never take the time to learn seller financing and instead they stick with bank loans, putting 20% down on deal after deal after deal, which is never gonna get you to scale where you wanna be in the shortest period of time possible. And if you want more real deal breakdowns, make sure to drop a comment and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll keep breaking down exactly how these deals get structured.